Hello and welcome to the 37th episode of Tailoring in Conversation. My name is Reza, and in this series I'll be talking to tailors, business owners, cloth merchants and other industry participants from all around the globe to gain a better insight into their worlds. My guest for today is Antonia Ede. Antonia is a bespoke cutter and founder of Montague Ede, a modern bespoke tailoring atelier with a traditional background based in London's Mayfair. Originally trained on Savile Row, Antonia began her apprenticeship at Hardy Amy's before she further developed her skills at Huntsman. In our conversation for today, we're going to be talking about starting a new company, the relationship between employees and employers, information sharing within communities, and much more. So without further ado, let's go. Antonia, first of all, one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, I read that you were a teacher in Wandsworth Prison.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is true.
Tell me about it.
I worked in Wandsworth. It's actually while I was at college, while I was at London College of Fashion. It was for an amazing charity called Pimlico Park Opera. And it was doing costumes. So Pimlico Park Opera is this brilliant setup where they go into prisons. And the idea is that you're training prisoners, inmates, in a skill. Mm-hmm. Because obviously getting a job when you get out of prison is very, very hard. Mm-hmm. There are a huge number of charities doing work like this. It's incredible. But the idea is that there's a performance at the end. So the performance is inside Wandsworth, mm-hmm. which is obviously a beautiful building. It's an extraordinary, very historical building. It's one of the old star formation grids. The guys that were working on it were absolutely amazing. Obviously, they'd had sort of good behavior reports, and mm-hmm. so we're being taught how to rig light, make costumes. There were performers. The whole setup was basically had to be initiated by the prisoners. It had to be encouraged by the prisoners and mm-hmm. learned.
How old were you at this time?
It was really good. I was, I want to say 21.
21.
Maybe. Yeah. So, and now I think about it, I'm like, oh gosh, that's quite a punchy thing to do. But actually, it was amazing. It was a really good experience, and there were a lot of people in there that obviously the great thing about it is you're not allowed to ask what anyone's in there for, and mm-hmm. they're not really allowed to know anything about you. They don't know your last name. They don't know anything else. But it was a really positive experience because all the people who were on this program mm-hmm. really wanted to learn and really wanted to have a positive to look forward to after they mm-hmm. came out. And I think there should be more schemes like this. I think there should be more effort to try and train up offenders. Mm-hmm. Really interestingly, one of my absolute sort of hero companies is Timpson's, the shoemaker. Mm-hmm. Because they mostly employ ex-cons.
Wow.
Yeah. So they train up ex-cons, and it's at the discretion of, Timpson's as a company is amazing. I look into it. It's just extraordinary. But the idea is that the manager in each store has mm-hmm. a huge amount of responsibility towards his staff, but also whether he keeps people on, how he trains them up, what he does with them. Mm-hmm. The Timpson family has 3 holiday homes in the UK for their staff to use. They have a huge amount of childcare support. It's a really great social initiative. Mm-hmm. And I think there should be more things like that. I think, even I'm sure there's space even within our trade mm-hmm. Of doing that. I kind of have this fantasy. If anyone out there wants to do it for me, I would be very pro it because I don't have time at the moment. But when I do have time, mm-hmm. I think actually what the UK is missing on the high mm-hmm. street is a series of, they can be franchised, they can be not franchised, alteration shops. So right. The Timpson's equivalent of an alteration tailor, where mm-hmm. you know the quality you're getting, mm-hmm. you know that there's a guarantee on the quality, you're not just going to go back to this alteration tailor and they'll have disappeared, which happens so often in London. And I think, even looking at the States, if you really like something in the US or a pair of jeans, you like the color, you buy them and you take them to your alteration. Everyone has an alteration tailor that they go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the UK, we have much more a disposable idea of fashion. And actually what I think we should be doing is going into prisons, training ex-cons or cons up as alteration tailors, because it is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's an applicable skill you can use in the real world. You can go out and work for one of these franchises, and you know that you're a certain quality. There could be like a diploma in it. And not only are you providing jobs, but you're also providing a really important service, because I think, reusable fashion or reusing clothes, hopefully the disposable fashion industry is going to slowly disappear. Yeah. And this will be one way of helping it happen.
Yeah. And this probably kind of like locks into this very famous and boring thing that some tailors say when they say that tailoring is not saving lives. What you've been doing in training those people is not only have you given them an opportunity to kind of like have a purpose, but also to learn a skill. I used to, when I was 17, I think, I had this 1 year where I was giving workshops to kids with difficult backgrounds. Parents were alcoholics, or they were sexually abused, or they had drug problems, gang crimes and stuff. And one of the things I noticed is that they were all very smart, but their intelligence was channeled in practical skills rather than academic skills. And so as soon as they did learn something, they would just continuously repeat that, and it looked as if they were just channeling all their aggression and all their kind of like energy into that. And so how was your interaction with the prisoners? I mean, were they open to what you were teaching them, or did they were kind of like, standing back and be like, who the hell are you telling me what to do, because prisoners are, they're not the most agreeable people, let's say.
I mean, the irony is Boris Becker's just gone to Wandsworth, so I feel like you can understand from that there's a huge cross section of people there. The thing about all these courses, and the thing about education within the prison system, is that to get onto them, you often have to be, get a big tick for good behavior. I do agree with you, though. I think what's fascinating about something that is a physical art like tailoring is that everyone learns in different ways. So I'm a very physical learner. If I'm shown how to do something and I literally watch someone do it, I can then understand that, copy it, replicate it, whatever. I didn't do particularly well at school because I am not the sort of person that can learn from sitting behind a desk, reading off a blackboard, reading a textbook. I found revising for exams incredibly difficult. I wasn't bad at writing essays, but the actual exam itself, I could know all the information, but would walk into the exam room and I would forget everything. I sat my last exam when I was 18, on my 18th birthday. And I have not looked back. But I think it's very interesting because my sister is a lawyer and is very kind of black and white, straight down the line, like very academic, and she can look at the page of a textbook, memorize that information and spew it back to me. And I think one of the ways which our education system needs to kind of change, and I don't say this as an educator, so I'm probably stepping on toes, but I think one of the ways that we need to adapt is by understanding that everyone learns in different ways. And that's why I think the apprenticeship system is so interesting, because, you don't, when people come to us saying, I want to be a tailor, I want to do an apprenticeship, I've got a degree from LCF and I've got a first in tailoring. Actually, in all honesty, that's not really, I mean, again, as my old boss used to say, he was like, don't really give a crap where you come from. Our old apprentice had a degree in geography from Bristol. Super switched on, super bright, quick learner. You could show her something and she'd get it. I didn't care that she had a degree in geography. Like, it didn't matter to us, because actually what mattered was that the way she learned was the way we could teach. And therefore it was a very kind of happy relationship. And we absolutely love her to bits. So I think it's a very interesting point. I also think the joy of something like tailoring is that you're creating something tangible. So if you're with a prisoner, or if you're with someone who, an ex-con or a difficult child or someone who's causing trouble, if you give them something to focus on that is tangible, that is, you can see progress instantly, it's really gratifying. Like when you finish cutting a 3-piece suit, you look at this wad of paper and you're like, cool, fantastic. There's something to show for my last 4 hours work. You know, there's something that I can actually see and feel and understand and look at. And then I also think the other side of that is that it's talked about a lot in our industry, rock of eye.
Mm-hmm.
Rock of eye as a phrase is, I mean, it kind of doesn't really mean anything, but what it does mean is that you learn through time what looks right and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also hugely gratifying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think teaching in a way that people can learn is very important, basically.
Yes.
Real.
No, that's I love it. You know, it's I guess going back to the prisoners, and then I'll continue with a few other things. But going back to the prisoners, I think, realizing that most people, I mean, being in prison is a very complicated thing. You don't just end up there. But there is also so some of them maybe may have been involved in like a murder, or they just psychologically just aren't there in a normal functioning. But some of them also do realize in prison that, hey, there's a life for me out there, but now I'm just stuck for a few years here. And most of those people who kind of like develop a conscience, they tend to repeat voices that they've heard, which is usually like, their own voices telling them that they're not good for anything, and all they do is just, mess things up. But then, like you say, when they see something tangible that they've made, it's as if you're bringing back that spark of life in them, to show them like, look, this could be your way out. And I think that's really crucial. And what you also said about the alteration, let's say, franchise, I think that's also very important. I was talking. I can't remember who I was talking to. I think I was talking to Joe Holsgrove about this, and he said that probably one of the easiest or the best ways to get younger people who can't afford Bespoke into Bespoke is to encourage the use of alterations, because that just gets them
100%.
into the right? So that connects with what you're saying.
But it's so interesting because it's just not in our culture. It's a very American thing to do. It's a very French thing. Every prison street corner has an alteration tailor on it, and you can be absolutely sure they'll be of a certain standard. And I think it's the other thing that we, looping back to the prison thing, I think it's very important at the moment to ensure that staying in prison isn't the easiest option. And, we have a very, very, my husband's cousin is working in a prison at the moment, and she's fascinating about it, because she said the issue is that reoffending is so high because actually if you've got a kid who's, particularly in a young offenders institute, if you've got a kid who's naughty and has done something wrong and it's their third strike, that's it. They get sent to a young offenders institute, and actually the minute they come of age, they get then transferred to an adult institution. That person isn't going to benefit from that. You're not, it's a serious slap on the wrist, i.e. it's time, but they're not going to benefit from going back into the system. You need to make sure that there is something that is more important. There's a chance, there's an option, there's a life after. And I think that's the amazing thing that Timpson's does, is that actually it's creating job opportunities, it's creating hope, it's creating an option of something that you can plausibly crack on with and make a life for yourself. And I think tailoring is a wonderful thing because it's not only a kind of physical job. You don't need to be an academic to become a tailor. Half the people, I mean, again, kind of coming back to Stuart, I don't think had any GCSEs. He was one of it was under Maggie Thatcher's apprenticeship scheme that he started. And he started Geese and Hawks, the trouser cutting apprentice. Trouser cutting, can't remember. And Geese took on 2 apprentices that year, and one of them was Stuart, and one of them was a young guy called Lee McQueen. And you look at the two of them, and you're like, kind of bit like probably got kicked out of school. Stuart didn't finish school. He was the youngest of 5. Both his parents sadly died, and so his siblings were like, "Okay, it's fine. You've got to get a job. You've got to earn a living." And that's how he became a tailor, because he quite liked clothes, and he thought, I could probably do this. Well, actually, for someone who's not academic, he ran a company. He learned how to cut patterns. He was a very good tailor. You don't have to be academically switched on to do it. But also, once you learn the craft, it's a career for life. You know, it is a skill. It's like being a bricklayer. You know, it's a skill. And I think often because our clients are these people who can afford bespoke tailoring, you forget that actually the guys that are making your clothes, you know, might not have a GCSE, but they can make a very good coat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, our industry is definitely evolving, and it's so dynamic that, you know, what we know about yesterday may not be any relevant tomorrow anymore. But one thing is for sure, you are now in your shop in Mayfair, and you just told me that you started this in 2019. So can you tell us
the shop started in 2016.
2016, forgive me.
Yeah. 2016. So we moved here in 2019. We did 3 years in Soho on Brewer Street, and then moved.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I think I remember that because when you were one of the judges at the Golden Shears, I think and I think I remember that's when I heard that you were going out on your own. So how was the transition from being employed at, you know, some of the bigger companies to going out on your own? What was the decision for you? What was the thought process? And how do you establish everything? Because, you know, you're in a shop actually, but one day this was all just a dream and this was all kind of like an idea. So how did it go from something out there in your mind into something that has a floor and walls and a ceiling and bundles and bunches?
Actually, it doesn't have a ceiling. You just can't see it. No, we... how did it start? So when I was at Hardy Amy's, I got the opportunity to move to Huntsman, and went and spoke to my boss, Stuart, and said, look, this job's come up. If you tell me I shouldn't take it, I won't. But I think it could be a good opportunity. And he was like, no, because Hardy's was small. We were a team of 3. We did all the sales. We did all the invoicing. We did literally start to finish everything. So it was an incredible learning experience. I learned the bunches. I learned, you know, in a lot of the bigger houses, you have salesmen. So the cutters never really get to know how to sell or know the bunches or know the linings or know that, because that all gets done by a salesman. At Hardy Amy's, it was kind of a baptism of fire. We did everything, you know, running around, trimming, sending out samples, setting up, you know, everything. And Stuart said, no, look, this is a huge opportunity. Huntsman at the time, I think, cut 5 times the amount of suits that we cut a year. And so I moved to Huntsman and was working under Pat Murphy, which was huge amounts of fun. Pat very sadly left. And so I was working as a cutter there on my own. And basically, I never wanted to work for myself. I always wanted to work for a company. But it got to the point where if you're the youngest cutter in a company, you'll be the person who cuts the bread and butter suits. So you're cutting blue suits and you're cutting grey suits. And that's fine and that's good. But if a really lovely, fun, juicy job came along, it'd probably be taken off you. And I just got to the point where I was like, actually, I'd quite like to have a chance to do some of this. I'd like to have the chance to show that actually I can be a bit more creative or whatever. And I spoke to Carol, who was the manager at the time, and kind of said to her, look, I'm really sorry. I've actually decided that I want a chance to do something a bit more creative. And she said, fair enough, off you go. And we had a really good chat about it. But it gave me a chance to be more creative, to kind of take on more fun jobs, do projects that I love, say yes to work that I wouldn't have been able to say yes to, say no to work that I didn't want to do. And it's been a really good experience. It's been really positive. And actually, I had sort of got to the stage when I left Huntsman that if it didn't work, I would just find another job.
Okay, I see. That makes sense.
And probably leave the trade.
Oh, completely.
I have I got a degree in costume. I'm not
Okay.
from a bespoke tailoring background. So I didn't sew until I was 18. I was going to do fine art at university. And then my boyfriend and I at the time had an argument. And so I withdrew my application and looked up where did the most life drawing a week in foundation. And that was London College of Fashion, who did a whole day a week. So I rang them up and I said, look, I can't sew, but I love drawing. What do you think? And they were like, yeah, come along to the portfolio if you're doing fine. And they took my portfolio along. And this was actually while LCF still did an art foundation course. I think they stopped it a couple of years after us. And so I did a year of basically as much life drawing as I could do. But also started doing a bit of pattern cutting. And at the end of the year, they said, okay, cool. Do you want to do men's or women's wear? And I was like, don't know. And they said, well, if you don't know, you should do costume because that covers both. And so I applied for the costume degree and got in. And it's a really small course, or it was a really small course at the time. There were 20 of us. And we got to do all kinds of things. I mean, tutus and hats and corsets. And really, it's a really lovely course because it's design and making. And then at the end of our second year, we had to do a tailoring module. And I kind of put off tailoring until then because I wasn't interested in it. And they were like, no, this is the 18th century menswear. You've got to do this. Like, sorry. And we had the most extraordinary tutor, who's a lady called Roxy Cressy. And I completely fell in love with tailoring and menswear. And for me, it was kind of a thunderbolt moment where I was like, this is actually what I want to do. This is really exciting. And so I did the 18th century menswear project, which I since have been back to teach, which was pretty surreal. And after that, decided that actually I wanted to do a traditional apprenticeship. So I spent 9 months in my last year at uni, going up and down Savile Row every 2 weeks with a CV, knocking on doors. I kept all my rejection letters. No one was looking for apprentices. This was 2011. 2010, 2011. And obviously we were still kind of in the recession. And I have rejection letters from people that are now my friends being like, no, don't want an apprentice. And eventually I went into Hardy Amy's and there was a guy in the front shop called Austin Muskinguse. And Austin was like, okay, fine, I'll see if I can pass on your CV. And as he was saying that, the CFO walked through, who's a guy called Ian Lewis, and he was like, okay, I've seen you in here before, what do you want? And I was like, I want an apprenticeship. And he was like, well, we can't offer you an apprenticeship, but we do have a part-time front of house job. Would you like it? And I was like, great, fantastic, I'll take that. No sales experience. I'd never worked on Savile Row before. I'd worked in a shop before, but a makeup shop. I didn't really know anything about cloth. And I was like, I'll just learn on the job. And so started working the following week. And they had said to me that I could do 4 days front of house and 1 day as an apprentice. And so Stuart came back from his 40th birthday and walked into the shop. And I was like, hi, I'm your apprentice. And he's like, what? I don't have an apprentice. And I was like, yeah, they just employed me. And he was like, hang on a second. He went upstairs, came back down and was like, so you're my apprentice. Fine. And he didn't really want to employ me. He'd never worked with a girl before. He didn't really want an apprentice, and he got lumped with me. And after that, I started with a day a week with him, and then it went up and up and up until I was full time. And we had another guy, Joe Butler, who's now at Dunhill, in the shop with us, who was also learning to cut. And so it was the three of us, and kind of went from there.
So for someone who wanted to become or be more creative and therefore left to set out an own establishment, let's say, why did you not stay with costumes? Surely they are doing more diverse things there than menswear. What's the story there?
In all honesty, it's so antisocial. I just like costume. Like, I did work placements on films, and you are the first one in and you are the last one out. And your working hours, I mean, like, if you're working on a film, you will be on set in the caravan at 5 a.m, steaming everything, getting everything hung out, and then you are the last person because you cannot go home until everything is steamed and hung out. And the work's kind of uncertain. Also, I love cutting. For me, it's less making and designing. I actually really enjoy the process of, having someone 3D using what is effectively a series of equations and maths to create something 2D for it to then go back to 3D. And I find that really exciting. I think that's really cool. And costume for me, it's really lovely and I really enjoy it. And I really love looking at costume in film and in theatre and whatever. But I only wanted to do menswear. Actually, I tell you, one place I probably would have gone and worked is the Royal Opera House. I did a work placement there in my first year at uni, my first summer at uni, and that I loved. I loved it because at that stage I hadn't really discovered tailoring, and so it was just loads of tutus and loads of like fun bodices and seams and that I found really fun and flouncy. But I think I'd always rather do it as a hobby and like bash out a tutu for my daughter rather than do it as a full-time job.
Right. Well, that makes sense. You are now a business owner, and having experienced being an employee and being in the world of, being in our industry as a professional, what do you think about this weird, strange problem that seems to be kind of like reinforcing itself, which our industry has? And the problem is something like every business owner knows that their apprentices may leave someday. Knowing that their apprentices may leave someday will automatically and quite naturally prevent the business owner to give like 100% of their time and kind of like resources to that apprentice. So there is always this underlying, you're a cool person, but I don't know if you're going to stay. I don't know if you're going to leave, so I won't be able to invest as much. I'm not going to give you as much responsibility. And so then that reinforces the employee or the apprentice in their perception sometimes, in the sense that they're like, it seems as if I'm never going to be able to, build something in this company, so I am going to leave. So what do you think that we could do as business owners, but also as apprentices and employees, for anyone listening, for our industry in building trust in a way that maybe an Antonia at Huntsman's or me at Chittleborough Morgan or someone else at another company can say, I trust this company. I really think I can become someone important in this company. And I will just be patient and go through it. And I'm sure that one day I will be able to be creative or implement my ideas. What do you think we can do about this? Because I'm sure this is going to happen to us at some point as well. Maybe like down 10 years, 20 years later. Oh, well, already happened. Even worse.
Yeah, no. So we really sadly lost our apprentice in May last year. Megan was pretty unusual. So we're on very, very good terms. And I'm saying this with the hope that she might one day come back. But the setup we had is that Dima and I are two separate companies. And Megan came to me through a friend and was like, I want to be a tailor. I was like, great, cool. Come and do a couple of days work experience. She then, at the end of the 2 days work experience, Dima and I had a chat and we were like, we've got to work out how to keep her. So she came and started working for us. And the deal was she did 2 days a week for each of us. And then whoever needed her most on the third day got her. So each week we kind of liaise about it and chat about who needed more help. And then we paid her a freelance rate for that day. Now, the difficulty is that for certain disciplines, apprenticeships are shorter. A cutting apprenticeship is the longest apprenticeship you can do. In order for someone, therefore, to become useful for you, you're looking at like year 2 or 3. It is a huge investment of time. Like, I say this as someone who's been an apprentice. I also say this as someone who remembers being an apprentice and remembers how unbelievably terrible the pay is. But I also was so lucky in that I was taught by 2 phenomenal men, Stuart at Hardy Amy's, Pat Murphy at Huntsman. And both of them poured everything into me. The reason I mentioned earlier about talking to Stuart about taking the job at Huntsman was exactly because of this. And and kind of heartbreaking. I always thought we would at some point work together again, which just never happened. But I think the joyful thing about our industry is that even if you're afraid of your apprentice leaving, it's your responsibility as the employer to make sure that that apprentice is, obviously they are an employee, they have to kind of toe the line, but also make sure that they're having as positive an experience as an apprentice as you possibly can. I am hugely lucky in that I knew I could always ring up either of my ex-bosses. I mean, I still do, and be like, hang on a second, look, I've had this before. This is the alteration I did. The alterations come up again. I've done it and it hasn't worked this time. Why is that? Or how would you deal with this? Or what do you think about this cloth? Or, there's constant communication. I think the answer is not to go into it going, how do I stop them from leaving? I think you have to go about it saying, how can I keep them? How can I make this job as good a role as possible in as good a company as possible that they don't want to leave? Megan left us because she left the trade. I mean, that's how bad it was. No, she got offered an opportunity in a company making bike bags. She's a very keen cyclist. She's very environmentally conscious. And this basically ticks all the boxes. And when she told us where she was going, we were like, we kind of get why you're going there. But I also think you sort of have to look at it in a way that if I'm kind of like an ex-boyfriend, you have to think, if I couldn't make it work with you, I couldn't make it work with anyone. It has to be that level of commitment. I think one of the major bonuses of our trade is that there is this extraordinary love of sharing information. I think people are astoundingly willing to share their knowledge, and I think that is such a strength and such a positive, and that brings me huge joy, because I feel like knowledge shared is an extraordinary thing.
Yes.
I hope that in the next 10, 15, 20 years, those who are withholding information in quite an old school way understand that there's no benefit to be had from it. There's no like ideal. There was a great story about a cutter at Huntsman, whose name I've completely forgotten, who used to do certain things to his patterns. So like, I don't know, he'd cut his patterns half an inch shy on the side body, or like an inch shy on the side body, knowing that with every single one of his patterns, when he strikes out, he'd add half an inch or 3/4 of an inch to the side body. So that if anyone else ever nicked his patterns or tried to use his patterns, they'd look terrible. Or like, he'd crooked all his jobs by a quarter. Whatever it was, he used to do the same to all his patterns so that no one else could benefit from it. Now, in my head, that's a stupid thing to do, because it's your pattern, yes, it's your work, it's your handiwork, but also we're only as good as the last job we cut. There's no, if a friend of mine has a query, or sorry, quickly, that's one of the things I love, is that there is no level of pride. Because the number of times I've asked a friend a question and been like, quick, spacing for a white tie, or someone rang me up and was like, oh, quickly, cutting morning coat, I haven't done one for 4 years. Quick question about how much fullness you put in the skirt. I love that there is not that pride, and there's not that kind of stigma about asking for help. But I think for the people who are withholding information, I think it'll come and bite them on the bum. I think it
well, if I would steal the pattern of that Huntsman cutter, and I would try to use it, and what he's doing to it after he's striking it out is his secret, I would strike out his pattern, and I would get really terrible results, and I wouldn't think, oh, I'm missing a secret. I would just say, what a terrible pattern. Who is this idiot? And so it doesn't really help in that sense. But so
I also think until you've worked with someone else's pattern, there's something quite Dima and I often discuss it. There's something quite stressful about working with someone else's pattern, because we all cut as we were taught by our masters. So there are like loads of different, hundreds of different systems. They all effectively have the same result, in that they'll all come out with a single-breasted coat and a plain fronted pair of trousers. Lee May, who I don't know if you actually came across before he moved to America, So to kind of fill in the loop, every 3 to 5 years, I always joke that everyone moves 3 places to the left on Savile Row because one person moves, then one person moves, and then one person moves.
Yeah.
But it happened that I moved to Pippa moved to Hong Kong. I moved to Huntsman. Lee moved to Hardy Amy's. Ollie Croft moved to where Lee was. We all we knew the people who were taking our jobs, and it was great. And Lee and I were having a conversation about trousers one day, and we set aside a Saturday. And between us, we worked out we could cut 5 different trouser systems. So we had one set of measures and cut all 5 systems. And we both cut both at the same time. So we had 10 patterns. And then we laid them all out. And I mean, it was fascinating. All those pairs of trousers would have gone on the client and would have looked okay. But they were all different. And so to me, I look at my patterns now and I cut Pat's coat pattern and Stuart's trouser pattern. So I'm effectively using a Frankenstein's cutting system, it's one of each. And I think it's very cool. I think it's very interesting. And I think it's a really lovely setup where, you kind of have that. But you're right, actually cutting off someone else's pattern, if it doesn't go together nicely, you're just going to think, oh my God, what are they doing? Like, and then it doesn't benefit anyone. And I always say to my tailors, and particularly those that I've worked with for a long time, it's a very good proxy for keeping the quality of work up, the way our trade works. Because if I consistently cut bad jobs, no one's going to want to work for me. They're all freelancers. Actually, they're going to be like, oh, actually, Antonia, I'm a bit full. Can't really take on another job. Equally, if they keep producing substandard jobs, I'm not going to give them any more work because it's not worth it. So you sort of have a built-in quality control by the fact that you have to make sure you're cutting well. You have to make sure your jobs go together nicely. You have to, and any tailor that tells me that, any cutter that tells me that there is a hierarchy within the trade, and cutters that are be all and end all, I think that's absolutely rubbish because A, I couldn't do my job without my tailors. B, I'm only as good as they are. And they're only as good as I am. And actually, I can learn a hell of a lot from my tailors. Because they know what they're doing. They are the best at what they do. And I can only aspire to be the best at what I do to make sure that relationship stays happy and stays good and works.
Well, it's funny when you mention this. I think you're 100% right. And I think one of the things that people forget who see cutters and tailors separately is that there once was a day where cutting and making was one job. It was the same, just only because of the necessity of things like wars and industrialization did they separate. But 200 years ago, 400 years ago, we were just cutters and makers, all in one. And so, and what you say about the sharing of knowledge, I think is extremely important, especially in a time period where a lot of young people, for whatever reason, partially the reason what you mentioned, the reasons that I have for leaving, are going out on their own. And so it creates a new community, and that sharing of knowledge and that camaraderie, let's say, helps to keep this new generation alive. And I can't decide. I mean, you tell me what you think, but I can't figure out whether it's a good thing that companies can't eventually keep all their apprentices, or whether it's a bad thing. Because I can imagine if you're an established company and you're not giving someone the fancy jobs, let's say, where they can be creative, and naturally they're going to be like, well, I want to be creative, so I'm going to leave. So then you lose them. But is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because, a company that exists for way too long will stagnate at some point, and then that's where you really need the new energy, whether it's going to be in a different shop or in the same shop. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. I think there has to be fresh blood. There has to be fresh ideas coming out of Savile Row. We need to make sure that it stays current and that there are exciting ideas coming through. That said, I feel really invigorated by the latest kind of push for people to do their own thing. And coming back to the information sharing thing, I love the fact that there are, I can think of 4 in the last year who've come to Dima and I and been like, hey guys, you set up on your own. I'm thinking about doing it. How do you find it? How did you do it? What do you do? I will 100% share that information with anyone, because a lot of the stuff we had to work really hard to find out, where do you get your labels made? Where do you get your garments bag printed? All of those things that actually, if I can save a friend 4 hours of work to find a nice place to get their garment bags made, I will absolutely share that. Because in a year's time, a client might walk into their workroom or their shop and say, I need to get a suit made for 6 weeks' time. Can you do it? They'll say no, but hang on a second. Antonia's around the corner. Let me give her a ring. And this does happen a lot where, as I said earlier, I'd rather a friend of mine got the job than no one got the job. I think the thing with keeping people in the trade, I mean, tailoring is the most addictive legal substance. So there will always be people who want bespoke suits, and there will always be people to make bespoke suits. The thing I think we need to focus on is, all these articles coming out at the moment, like death of the suit, COVID's killed the suit, no one's ever going to come into the office again. All of that stuff is so ridiculous because of the fact that they're focusing on the wrong market. They are focusing on T.M. Lewin, Charles Church, Roderick Charles, and the guys that go in and buy 2 suits a year with 2 pairs of trousers. They walk to death around the city, kill these suits, send them to a dry cleaner, get them pressed in a hotel, and then the next year they'll buy another 2 suits. Those guys aren't going to buy those suits because they're not going into the office every day. And when they are, it's mostly casual, other than the 3 meetings they have a week. But those are the clients who now are coming to people like me and going, okay, look, I used to spend that on 2 suits plus 2 pairs of trousers. Actually, can you make me a really nice suit for a little bit more than that, but one that'll last me for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
And that's what's great about what we do. Pat Murphy has suits that are older than I am. Like, they're still going strong. Like, it's one of those things where these garments are timeless. These are pieces that are built to last. And so actually, if you're prepared to invest in it, and I think that's where the change has come, that people are prepared to invest in it. And therefore, it's kind of there'll always be people to make them. There'll always be apprentices. There'll always be our trade. It's just whether the big houses need to buck up and be like, okay, fine. Maybe we need to adapt the way we're teaching them.
Yes.
Actually, sorry, on a side note, one of the things that most annoys me is when people say, I treat my apprentice like this because that's how I was treated.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is, sorry, excuse my French, but I think that's fucking annoying. Because actually, that is not an excuse. You should treat your apprentice how you wanted to be treated or how you thought you should be treated, i.e., with respect. People are complacent about how they were taught. I don't see any reason that you should be an arsehole to your apprentice. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it necessarily benefits the way you teach people. I was treated by both my bosses with huge respect and care and kindness.
Yes.
And I've come out all right. Like, I don't understand this sort of bullying tactic. And I think I had a client at Huntsman where before the end of the fitting, I said to him what I always say to my clients, which is, is there anything you've seen that I haven't seen that you'd like tweaked? Are you happy with the sleeve length? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? How long do you like your sleeves? And he said, oh, well, Mr. Hammock just used to tell me. And I was like, what? So his tailor just used to tell him how he liked it. And that was just that. And I think with apprentices, it's often the same, where they're just told that is how it is. That is how your apprenticeship should be. It should be a difficult experience. It should be really hard work. It shouldn't be. It doesn't need to be. Actually, everyone learns in different ways. And if you are like me and you learn through someone being kind to you and showing you a productive way forward, it means that when you do inevitably make a mistake, you aren't terrified to admit to it because you know you can learn from it. And you know that your boss will be like, actually, Antonia, that's really annoying. And that's a really expensive mistake you just made. Don't do it. You're like, okay, cool, I'll take that on board and I won't do it again because I'm mortified that I've had to do that because I like and respect you so much. I don't want to make a mistake.
Yes, I agree. I think there is something mean, just psychologically about people who say, well, I was abused during my apprenticeship, so you should be too. And I think what they want to do really is they just want to take the revenge that they couldn't from that person that they should have spoken about it, and so now they're taking it out on someone else. Plus, I think those people who do that don't really want to develop anyone. They just want to have someone under their thumb as almost like a paid slave kind of thing, So developing people really.
I don't see any point in it.
No, it's just there's a lot of complexes there, I think, because when you want to develop, you have kids, right? And so when you want them to develop and become something the best they can be, let's say, you pay a lot of attention, and you watch them, and you see where they're doing well, and you encourage that, and you give them feedback. As they grow older, you give them good advice about future decisions, etc. And that's what a good employee, aka master or mentor, would do. Now, I have another question, Antonia, about your company. Do you obviously are you currently the only cutter in your company?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm thinking about, and I'd like to discuss this with as many people as possible, but I'll start with you, is that you're and I don't think this really matters that much in the end result, but I do think there are some nuances here and there, and I'll explain why. So you're cutting mainly men's clothing, and I only men's clothing. Yeah. Okay, so even better, even more extreme. So you're cutting only men's clothing, and men's clothing traditionally in the history of time has mainly been developed by male labor and kind of like military institutions and uniforms and all of that. Now that we are becoming more creative and kind of like open as a community of tailors, I don't know how in the next 100 years things will evolve, but we are kind of like in the beginning shift where we're getting a lot more female cutters and female coat makers, and it's going to be kind of like just like a transition, like a blend, and then it's like, okay, whoever wants to be a maker or a cutter can be. Now, how do you think your feminine traits, let's say, influence your view on the perfect ideal masculine figure in the garments that you're creating? I'm very curious about that.
The new male gaze. So I think that's a really good question. Okay, so the reason that I only do menswear is because I trained in menswear and I love menswear. Hilariously, most people think that I do women's wear because I'm a woman. And I painstakingly have to explain that actually, unfortunately, I don't. I did a bit of women's wear when I set up on my own, in that I was like, I'll take any order I can get. And actually got so little joy from them that I decided to just go back to what I love doing and stick to what I love doing and stick to what I know I love doing. I think women's suiting is amazing when it's done well, but I also think it's very easy to do badly. And I think it can often look quite frumpy and quite staid. I mean, I do not wear a suit jacket every day because I have quite a girly figure. And I have only ever cut like a couple of things for myself that I like, which is shameful, but actually my husband has a very nice wardrobe. So I think in terms of the aesthetic, actually, sorry, I'm going to flip that round the other way. In terms of jobs within our trade, I always laugh when I think about kind of the gender stereotypes within each job. Obviously, cutters tend to be men, finishers always women, pressers always men, which makes me laugh because men doing the ironing. But actually, those irons are so heavy. And again, finishing, it's such dainty, delicate work that there is a reason why it tends to be beautiful, tiny ones sort of doing it because they've got really delicate hands. I think with other jobs, coat making and trouser making, there is absolutely no reason why who worked on your job should affect anything. When I was a huntsman, and hopefully I'm not sort of really treading on toes speaking out of telling a story, but when I was a huntsman, a client came in and the salesman took the order and then said, I'll go and get the cutter. and came and got me. I measured the client, all was well. He left the shop. I said, we'll get a fitting ready. He rang the shop, and this guy was like mid-50s, American, like white guy, rang the shop and said, actually, I'd like to have a male cutter. And I was like, okay, firstly, you didn't have the balls to say this to my face, which is quite embarrassing for you. Secondly, like, what difference do you think that is tangibly going to make? I've been taught by a guy, I cut men's suits, I'm trained in men's, like, come on. So I went to Campbell, who's head cutter at Huntsman, off Pat left, and I said, Cam, like, it's actually really annoying. And Campbell was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to cut the suit. Only girls are going to work on it. I'll fit it. And at the end, we'll talk to him. And we did it. And I don't actually know what Campbell said in the fitting room when this guy collected the suit, but I made sure to the point that I pressed the suit. Like, took me a while because it's been a while since I've been pressing, and I'm no way near as good as George. But I was like, I am determined that only women will work on this suit, because actually I've now got a point to prove. And that's not particularly like me. I was obviously feeling particularly stubborn at that time, but it does annoy me. And it annoys me on a scale, because actually I've also had a blustering old client who must have been like in his 90s, and I walked into the fitting room and he said, oh no, you can go and get the cutter now. And I was like, no, I am the cutter. And he was like, oh, well, how modern. And I was like, fair enough. And we then had a lovely fitting, and it was really good, and he was really happy, and we, yada yada yada. I've had other clients who've asked me to go and get the tailor, and I'm like, no, I am the tailor. And they've like, no, the male tailor that worked on it. And so I've gone and got a male coat maker, and they've walked into the fitting room and been like, yeah, no, Antonia cut this. This is how it works. And it does make me quite sad when you have to prove a point like that. I think the mega advantage of being your own company is that by the time people get here, I mean, firstly, we're upstairs, so we don't have a shop front. So we tend not to get time wasters, which is great. There are a lot of time wasters on Savile Row. Often lovely people, but like, come on, we've all got better things to do. By the time people come to us, they normally know that they want to order. Like they've done their research. They know that we're quite a young house. They know what we do. They know how we cut. They want to order. They also, if they've done their research, know that they're coming to a woman. What drives me mad, quickly going back to the learning thing, the apprenticeship thing, is when people send me emails to my email address being like, dear sir, please find and close my CV. And I'm like, look, I'm really sorry. I'm not even going to use this name, because you obviously haven't looked at my website. You've obviously just found this like list of SRB tailoring houses or whatever and just bashed out the same email. Actually, if you can't be asked to look up that I'm a woman, I'm not going to bother giving you anything. Like, I'm really sorry. Do your research. It's just lazy. In terms of silhouette, I don't think I cut a particularly feminine cut, but I would say that I cut a Huntsman coat, which is by proxy quite feminine, high armhole, nipped in waist, full skirt, quite crisp shoulder. Like it is naturally quite a kind of defined silhouette. And because I was taught by Pat, that's my kind of go-to. But one of the joys, again, of being on my own is that if someone comes in and says to me, I want a machine washable, unstructured, completely unlined suit, I'll be like, okay, cool, let's work out how to do this. Let's let's go to town, let's try and make it happen. And so as a result, with more relaxed tailoring coming in, we have been cutting slightly more relaxed silhouettes. There is a point where I say no, in that sometimes, and it tends to be again with younger clients, where they're like, oh, can you make it a bit shorter, a bit shorter? And I'm like, no, you will look stupid. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's why you're being paid for that job. You are the professional who decides eventually on those things.
Well, I mean, but I'm not the one wearing it.
Sure.
So I will guide and I will advise. And actually, I always say the joy of Bespoke is that you're using the idea of how someone sees themselves with your creative and technical knowledge, and you're just splushing them together and seeing what happens. I think we see a lot of trends. So we see, I remember when Mad Men came out, we were doing suddenly loads of double-breasted suits. Peaky Blinders came out. Oh, everyone wants a three-piece. It's very the shift is very tangible, and obviously popular culture does play into that. But I think I quite like soft tailoring. I think it's very, it's a fancy cardigan. It's lovely to wear. It's a great garment. And unstructured jackets are beautiful. They're beautifully made. I think, I don't have that much time for people who are like, this is our house cut and we will do nothing else.
I think that's a very bad thing. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I think as well. So would you say that when you are looking at your garments and you're looking at the person in front of you, do you envision something ideal that you would generally use on most of them and then make finer adjustments to it, or do you try to look at the person and be like, okay, this person definitely cannot get away with a nipped waist even if they have a nipped waist, something like that? How do you look at that?
So I ask a lot of questions. When I take an order, I ask a lot of questions. From asking someone whether they run hot, whether they're like naturally a warm person, which FYI, people either say, "What do you mean?" or "Yes."
Yeah.
And you can tell by that instantly whether they do or not. If someone's like, "Oh, what do you mean?" You're like, "No, you clearly don't run hot." But asking if someone runs hot, if it's someone who's naturally quite slim, often they don't want something that's super slim fitting because they've looked skinny all their lives and they want something that kind of makes them look like they've got a bit more chest or whatever.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our job, Stuart used to refer to it as the Taj Mahal effect. It's an optical illusion. So a lot of cutting a pattern is creating that illusion, is creating that kind of aesthetic where your proportions look right. We are all wonky. We're all wonky. We've all got different wobbles and shapes. And, the reason why a lot of people come to us is they can't buy off the peg. I think our job as a tailor is to make that aesthetic look as good as it possibly can. So I always say, obviously we're in mid morning coat madness, but I always say with morning coats, actually they're a wonderful garment because you have to cut the trousers higher so that the waistcoat isn't too long. And then the coat is a body coat, so the waist is high naturally. And then it's got this beautiful skirt. And what that does is make everyone look like they've got terribly long legs. Their body, you can get a really nice shape through the waistcoat because actually you have that ability to create a kind of tight frame. And then you've got this coat on top that makes everyone look like they're very, very tall and very elegant. And I think, we want to kind of almost aspire to do that practice throughout any garment you're cutting. So whether it's an overcoat, making sure the length of an overcoat is right and doesn't swamp someone, or making sure that, I don't know, a shooting jacket doesn't make them look like they borrowed their dad. It's all about finding the right proportion for that person.
Exactly, yeah.
And the Taj Mahal effect with the bent steps at the front.
Okay.
It all works out in the end and they look straight.
Yeah. Antonia, I have a few words that I've written down during our conversation. I'm gonna run them through by you, and you in one word tell me the first thing that pops up your mind. Okay.
Okay.
So, the role of tailoring in society.
Style.
Setting up your own company.
Scary.
The most important thing about an apprenticeship.
Kindness.
What did you say? Kindness. Okay. Creativity.
Yeah.
Work. Interesting. Costume.
Hobby.
Okay. Trust.
Sorry?
Trust.
Apprentice.
Interesting. Women's wear.
Minefield.
Okay. If you had a magic wand and you could make 3 changes in our industry, what would those 3 changes be?
better funding for apprentices, more accessible funding for apprentices, getting rid of the bloody business rates, which just like caps everyone's aspiration for what they can achieve within a company. You know, rent and business rates in central London are ridiculous. And every mayor of London says they're going to change it, and no one does. The third one's difficult because I think I would love to make tailoring more accessible. You know, what we create is very expensive. It is a very expensive product because it's made properly and it's made ethically and it's made with good materials and it's made to last. But that's not cheap. All our tailors are paid properly. You know, everyone is within 100 meters of here. Everyone that works for me is paid weekly. And that is very important to me. You know, if you put the work in, your log gets paid that week. I think people need to start investing, but I think the problem is that in order to invest, people have to have a greater understanding of why something is so expensive. And if you explain it to people, and if you say to them, well, actually, I can name every person that worked on your suit, and I know that they're all paid properly, and I know that, you know, Dave's putting a new kitchen in this week, so I've chucked a bit more work his way. People understand that. But I think for Joe Blogs on the street, the reason Bespoke is so expensive doesn't really make sense, because there are a lot of companies, a lot of designer labels that are making huge markups on something. And I understand that that's because it's got the correct label in it. But when A Single Man came out, a Tom Ford dinner suit was more expensive than a completely handmade one on Savile Row. Now that is ridiculous, because actually for the price of that Tom Ford dinner suit, you're providing a living for 3 people. And actually it's something that's probably better made and will probably last longer and probably cut better for your figure. I'm not saying the Tom Ford ones are beautiful, but you know,
I understand,
and so I think I would make tailoring more accessible in that I would create a better understanding of why you should be buying clothes that last, why you should be investing in pieces to build your wardrobe for life rather than to follow trends.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. And last but not least, Antonia Ede.
I mean, I'm a tailor, I'm a business owner, I'm a mum, I'm a friend, I am a wife, I'm a sister, you know.
Wonderful.
I think the interesting thing, quickly scooting back, I think the one thing our trade struggles with is that often, because it's quite a male industry, if you're at work as a male cutter, you're at work. And that is that, and that is very much it. I think if you're at work as a female cutter, you're also, and this is, you know, one of the reasons why I'm so lucky to have my job, because I can allow for this, but you're also thinking about like the school run and getting jobs out to clients and making sure your tailors are happy and oh my God, did I put the laundry on? Or, you know, all of those other things. And I was talking to my sister about it the other day, who said that she finds it really difficult because actually there is this extra load. And I think a lot of female tailors, and I could be speaking out of turn, so I could be completely alone in this, but I feel like a lot of female tailors are constantly juggling because actually there is a little bit more, a little bit more expectation, a little bit more kind of to do. You know, I can't go on a trunk show for 3 weeks around America.
No, it makes sense.
Kids,
it makes sense. Yeah.
You know, it's
complex.
You're juggling.
But, you know, I understand what you're saying. You know, you have so many different tasks that you have to manage at the same time. And if people thought that running a business is difficult, well, try running a business and a family and your own ideas and, you know, everything else that you have to do. When was the last time you took a holiday?
Oh, no, I had this weekend off. It was lovely.
Oh, okay. Well, weekend. Okay.
Yeah. The bank holiday. No, I think it's just one of those things where you learn to juggle it. But I also think our our job, or the job of a cutter particularly, is that you are, I kind of, in my head, I weirdly visualize it, like you're a ring.
Mm-hmm.
And off that ring, you've got like other spinning rings.
Mm-hmm.
So all your tailors are those spinning rings. So those rings are linked to you. And then there's another ring, which is your client.
Mm-hmm.
And the link up and the logistics and the communication has to be there, or they all stop spinning. Like if you stop spinning, they all stop spinning. They all fall apart. As with what I said about the quality of work earlier, I think it's very important for companies to start looking after their tailors in times where there is less work, or in times when work isn't so certain. You know, the pandemic being a prime example of this. I think looking after your tailors isn't just necessarily paying them. I think it's looking after their welfare. I think it's looking after, you know, making sure that everything's kind of ticking along, or rejigging clients if they're really like overwhelmed and can't get a job done in time. There's no point in shouting at someone to get work done. Like actually the answer is to say, okay, fine. If you're snowed under, that's not a problem. What we'll do is we will move that client by a week, give you an extra week to work on it. If you've done it 3 days early, great. If you haven't, you've got until then. But that is a joy of running my own company, where I can ring a client and say, it's Antonia here. I'm really sorry, but actually my tailor's having a really difficult week, or has moved house, or has had a baby, or whatever. Can you give me another week on it? And they always say yes, because they're human. And, you know, you joked earlier about people saying, you know, we're not saving lives. I mean, we're not saving lives. What we do is clothes. But also, people take huge joy in that. And if they're getting a garment that they know has been rushed through, and the person that's working on it has kind of done a bit of a bodge job because they're under pressure, they're not going to enjoy wearing it. Like,
no,
actually, we want to create something that is worth the money that we're charging for it. At Huntsman, Pat used to do this really interesting thing that I actually always really respect him for. He'd come in the morning, make him a cup of coffee, and then he would go downstairs and walk through the workshop. And the whole point of that tiny action is to check in. You're just checking in with your guys. You're making sure that people are happy. You're making sure there are no major arguments going on, because workshops, as we all know, are small spaces. You're seeing how people are juggling work. You're seeing how people are coping with work. You're seeing how people are managing. You're like asking how people's kids are, or asking how their wedding was, or, you know, those all make for a happier workplace. I think running a tailoring firm as anything other than a tailoring firm is a mistake. You don't become a tailor if you want to be a millionaire. You become a tailor because you love the craft, and you love what we're doing, and you love the fact. And yes, don't get me wrong, it's a job at the end of the day. Like, it is a job, and you treat it like a job. But I also think you come into this industry because the people are here. And as a result, you have to look after those people. And you have to make sure that they're okay, because, you know, it's your family, it's your work family. And I think running it like a sort of city business isn't necessarily
it's terrible.
There are a finite number of tailors.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think when you're leading a company, I think you're bringing such a good point up. It's your responsibility as the person who is in contact with the client to protect, or at least look after the tailors, in the sense that if the client says, hey, I need this suit by tomorrow, and you know that some poor soul in the back of your workshop has to, you know, half develop some sort of a disease working on that jacket, it's your responsibility to just say, no, sorry, we need another week, because I don't want to crush my tailors. And I think that usually I hope it happens often, but I don't know how often it happens. But certainly the times that it didn't happen, I remember it was terrible. I was like, hey, another human being has to make this. You know, if the client says I need it tomorrow, just say no, it is not possible. You know, there's no point in telling the customer, yes, sir, tomorrow it's going to be there, and some other person at the cost of someone else's health. So, no, I agree with you. I agree. And it's good to think about.
And I also
these
think
things.
that's a very difficult thing about taking on a rush job. I generally try and avoid them because I don't need the stress. But equally, if I'm going to take on a skiffle, I will not take on that order until I have spoken to the tailor that I'm going to give it to and said, actually,
Yes.
do you fancy a quick job?
Yeah.
These are the deadlines. And with a skiffle, I always book in all of the fittings when I take the order so that I can go to the tailor and say, okay, these are the deadlines. This is when it's going to be a base. This is when it's going to be a forward. This is when it's going to be a finish. It will all be over by that week. That is the day he's picking it up. Are you up for it? If they say yes, fantastic, I'll do it. If they say no, I'm not going to take on that job because it's not fair for me to do it. You know, it's not fair for me to kind of randomly take an order and then assume that someone else will sacrifice their evening for it. Like, that's not okay. It's fine if it's my evening because it's my order, but actually, I'm like just at the top of the chain. Like, it's not, you know, you've got coat maker, trouser maker, waistcoat maker, finisher, presser. All those guys have to pull their fingers out for me. And that's a big ask.
Yeah, true. That's very true. That's very true. Well, Antonia, thank you very much for this conversation.
It's really nice talking to you.
Yeah, I don't know if this sounds weird, but I didn't imagine enjoying so much talking to you. I think the last time I saw you in person was just when you were judging the Golden Shears. I think that was literally the last time I saw you.
Since then.
No, yeah, it's like a few years now, and yeah, obviously in between I didn't have any communication. But thank you again for this lovely chat, and
thanks for making time.
It felt as if we were just in a cafe or something, but. The next time I'm in town, I definitely will visit you and say hello, and try not to be and I'll try not to be a time waster.
Not at all. Come on out. Everybody welcome.
No, I will.
All right, lovely to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Antonia. Appreciate it. And that was Antonia. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to see more of Antonia, you can follow the links to her Instagram and website in the description of this video. If you have any thoughts, comments, or anything you'd like to mention, please let us know in the comment section, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.